go. Excellent. Okay, let me know if anybody has any questions. We'll start off that way. Any questions about the expectations? Any questions about the content?
I have a question, actually. Regarding the IDs,
Yes.
in the video, in the orientation, it says that you will assign us IDs, but then on the page it says that it's first come, first serve. I was just curious which one it was.
I changed my mind. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I went to look at if I could assign it, and it was very cumbersome to do that. So I'm just going to make it first come, first serve. So when you see an ID that you want to explore, grab that up. You might want to choose 2 or 3 of them because if somebody else posts one before you, then you got to choose a different one. So,
Okay.
and then keep in mind, ultimately, what we're doing with those IDs too, it's just a way of making sure that people kind of are paying attention to some of the details. So on quiz, depending on which course, are you in my full semester or half or mini-mester?
Full semester.
Full semester. So let me bring up that. There are, which quizzes will that be in? I think that's in quizzes, identifications. Yeah, quiz. Yeah, it's both actually for the same. So quizzes 2, 4, and 8. There will be identifications from various units randomly selected.
Okay.
So the idea of the discussion board for the IDs is basically to have a kind of commons area for a class study session. So do use that when other students post, do go through there and see what other students have posted and use that to further develop your notes. Now, don't completely rely on what other students are doing. They might be posting things in there that might be not absolutely correct or not complete. Although most students do post things that are correct, and for the most part, it's pretty well complete what I'm seeing so far. But do verify through the content that as much as there that can be is there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I actually have another question regarding the IDs.
Sure.
Since it's first come, first serve, is it possible that somebody could decide to post all of them at once and then nobody has them, or are you only going to accept one submission per person?
Yeah, it's just one submission. So if somebody
Okay.
went ahead and did that, that would be very weird. But yeah, just I'm only expecting one from each student,
Okay.
and then you reply to 2 other students
Yeah.
and add anything that needs to be added, and that will get you as much credit as possible for your ID post for that unit.
So,
Awesome. Thank you.
so on top of posting your ID post, you have to reply to somebody else's as well and add to theirs.
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
you'll want to read. Yeah, you'll want to read through everybody's post and just see if there's a. It could be something as simple as, let's say somebody's talking about, I don't know, Jamestown. They post about Jamestown, and they forgot to put the year in which it was founded. So it could be something as simple as Jamestown was founded in 1607.
Okay.
Right.
And then we get extra points for that as well.
You'll get credit for your ID posts for that as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sade, to answer your question, yes. So everything I'm saying does apply to the mini-mester, U.S. History 1301. All right. Anybody else have any other questions?
The other video chat that you did, when would that be up so we can go over it?
They're still working on it. For some reason, they did an upgrade to Blackboard Collaborate, and they can't download the MP4 files right now. So as soon as they let me know, I will download that MP4 file.
Okay.
And post it in Selly.
Okay, I think that's about it because our quiz is due tomorrow, and then our ID post is due next week, and then our essay exam is also due within next week Friday, right? I think.
Yeah,
I'll
just
have
go by
my-
what just go by what the schedule says.
Okay, awesome. I think that's about it for me.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else have any questions?
I guess not.
Let me know. I'll stay on here. You can either chat your question to me, or you could do it in audio. But I'll stay on for a little while.
Okay, Mr. Kennedy. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and log out. I'll go ahead and
Sure.
keep in touch with you if I have any questions. I honestly I feel so bad because I haven't really done a lot of reading. I work full time and then I have my daughter. She's almost 2, so I have to be running after her. Like my mom is out of town, so my mom can't help me right now. So I'm trying to catch up as much as I can.
Yeah, it's a lot of work trying to
Yeah,
juggle
it is.
everything. But yeah, I know how it's done. But yeah, just use those learning objective prompts as your guide to know what to write notes down for. That's why those prompts are there. So
Yes, they've been like I've read LO1 and LO2, and I'm about to jump into LO3. But yes, they are a huge help. Like it helps you
Okay,
understand what you're trying to read.
okay, excellent, excellent.
Okay.
And
Okay,
do know
thank
too,
you.
wait, before you go, Tina, is that
Yes.
Tina I'm talking to?
Yes.
Do know too that although I highly encourage you to do as best as you can with the schedule, do you know the way the quizzes are structured? Let's say you don't do as well on quiz 1. Do know that quiz 2 will ask you to randomly respond to learning objectives for that week's reading, as well as previous weeks. So if
Okay.
you happen not to get all of your notes fully developed, you have an opportunity to go back and fully develop them, and those, whatever you earn on quiz 2, will be applied to quiz 1 if it's lower, just minus 10%. So for instance, if you earn a 60% on quiz 1 for some reason, and you end up earning a 95% on quiz 2, quiz 1 becomes an 85%.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Anybody else?
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, Tina. About 5 of us or 4 of us on here, so let me know if you have any questions.
I was going through the first learning objective for section 1,
Yes.
regarding the Native American nations and their corresponding states in today's time.
Yes.
What are the different colors on the map referring to?
Climate and region. Don't worry about it too much, but climate and region.
Okay. Then yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Okay. Let me know if anything else comes up. Anybody else? It's just Q&A today. So just let me know if there's any expectations that you've been wondering about, or content issues for anybody out there listening. All right. Well, who else is on here? Looks like Sade is still on here, I think. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Tell. Right here. Philip.
I'm here,
Linda. Okay. Yeah. Just do you have any questions at all?
sir. I was kind of coming on here just to see what everybody else was asking because I'm still overwhelmed. I'm trying to get my head around this. I haven't been in school for a while, so this is my first semester back.
Okay. So are you working have you finished the orientation exam?
Yes.
Okay. Did any questions or points of confusion for you come up then as you were going through the expectations of the course?
No, not as far as the expectations. Just a little worried that I can keep up. I didn't think about it when I picked your class that it was a mini master and it was going to be very fast paced.
Mhm.
So I think that's like that's the biggest thing. Everything just being crammed into less time.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that is a challenge. It is fast paced. You're dealing with a full semesters of content within half the time. So Alberto, looks like you have your hand up. You can go ahead and chat anytime you like, or respond in the chat room. But yeah, I highly suggest, as far as keeping up and organized, to have a spiral notebook in which you write your notes in, organize it by learning objectives. Most students don't do this, but I highly suggest handwriting out the learning objective prompts as well as your notes, to any extent that you can, and are willing to. It will. It's not about memorization, but it is helpful if you have some familiarity before you begin your quiz or begin preparing writing your essay exams. And handwriting notes does help with that, rather than simply just typing them out. We kind of lose our cognitive awareness basically when we type text rather than handwrite them.
You said it's not about memorization. Does that mean then that we're allowed to use our notes on the quizzes?
Yes, you can use your notes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Now, what I say about that, though, is the quizzes are timed, and so you want your notes to be organized, and to the ability that you are able to, don't rely on them. So have them there as a point of reference for yourself, but try to be as familiar as possible before you click begin, because they are timed, and some students that are vigorously going through a bunch of disorganized notes and relying on them completely of printouts and whatever the case may be, you usually run out of time. But if they're organized, you have some familiarity with the content, you'll do fine.
Okay,
And
fair enough. Will Blackboard Lockdown's browser tell us like when it's recording us on the webcam?
Are you referring to the quiz?
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't have to use your webcam for the quizzes. You'll just have to get on Lockdown browser, and there'll be a timer on there, and it'll let you know how much time is left.
Okay.
So, sir, how much do we get penalized if we're in the middle of a quiz and we run out of time? Like, because everything is an essay form. So, I mean, what if we don't conclude our essay?
Well, the quiz. Okay, two things. Quizzes are timed, exams are not. So if you run out of time, it just depends on how many learning objectives you didn't get to that were included in that quiz. So if you don't get to one of them, well, you won't get credit for one if you didn't complete two of the learning objectives. And as you get through the quizzes, they're all a little bit different as far as how many learning objectives there are, or identifications. So yeah, you will just lose credit for whatever ones you don't get to. So that's why it does help, again, to have organized notes, and to handwrite your notes. And I do suggest handwriting them so you are familiar, so you're not consistently looking down at your notes in order to complete the quizzes. Most often than not, students do have plenty of time to complete the quizzes, from my experience with these courses.
All right.
Melinda Lopez asks, back to chapter 1, learning objective 1, would it be correct that Comanche were just in Texas? The colors don't mean that they lived in other states. Am I correct? I believe so. Let me bring that up just to make sure. And that, yeah, you will find that some of Native American nations lived in various states because they lived there before the states were created. But yeah, just go by whatever the map says. But let me just look to verify.
I know personally I had a little bit of trouble with that, identifying the state. And I know you said not to use outside resources, but I did Google which areas they lived in originally. And
Yeah, you could do that as well if for that particular one, but be careful Googling too much for information, because Google will take you to all sorts of crazy sites. Let's
fair
see what
enough.
this says. Comanche, yeah. Yeah, they just resided up in Texas, so that would be fine. Parts of Oklahoma as well, from what I know, too, but that's fine. They mainly were just in Texas.
So if we get asked about this one, like, would we have to? Would it be like a list? Name all the tribes, name the regions.
You'll get a map that will have labels on it, A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. And you'll correspond the labels with the Native American nations that are listed in the quiz. So not all of the Native American nations might be listed in your quiz question, but if your notes are complete, you won't have anything to worry about. This learning objective here is intended to let you know the diversity of the people that lived here before Europeans, and where they lived and how they were in what regions of the country that they lived. There's a tendency for a lot of people to think, well, the Native Americans or the Indians, without distinguishing between, well, these were very different people and distinct from each other. It would be ridiculous, I think, for us to probably say, well, Europeans, and someone would ask you, well, what do you mean by Europeans, the Spanish or the English? And someone would say, well, they're all kind of the same. We would go, no, Spanish and English people are very different from each other. Who are you referring to? So it's good to be aware of just the names, at the very least, of this very diverse group of people.
That's good to hear, though. I was stressing out about that at first because it's a lot of information just to learn by rote.
Yeah, oh yeah. And so you're not. I'm not asking anyone to memorize it, but I do want you to prepare ahead of time. So if you are asked within a time situation, you are able to quickly refer to your notes and get through it quickly. That's why, yeah, I just heavily encourage to take notes and keep them organized in a notebook. And also, let me add, to prepare for your exams. A lot of students ignore this advice, but let me see what happens. Employ the strategy of index cards. It is the way to write essays. So a lot of students really stress out about writing essays, and it's okay to stress out about the expectations to some extent, because it just means that you care about what you're doing. If you weren't stressed about it, then it would mean you wouldn't care. You probably wouldn't do very well. But you want to avoid being anxious. You want to avoid anxiety. And so to do that, preparation is essential. And so this is a very efficient way of preparing. So you want to make sure you have the prompt. Just be very well aware of the prompt. So it's very of the essay prompt. So the first essay prompt for Unit 1 is evaluate the contradictions between the development of slavery and self-government from the colonial to the revolutionary era. So 1607 to 1776, that's basically what Unit 1 generally is covering for the colonial era. Anytime you come across information, whether you're reading something in Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, or Chapter 4, have a stack of index cards handy. Anytime you read anything from there that seems, at that time, to help you respond to that essay prompt, write that information down, whether it's a quotation, whether it's a date, whether it's a historical individual, whether it's a law, a battle, whatever the case is, just write it down. You don't want to write a whole bunch of information down, but just a little bit of information that says, okay, yeah, that points to in some way responding to that essay prompt. And on the other side, write where you got it from. Chapter 1, learning objective 3, whatever the case is, right? and put it aside, right? And as more information comes up, keep writing and work as you go. The thing that really gets students is that they go, okay, the essay is due in 3 days. I better start preparing for it by actually beginning to do the research. If you do the research while you're preparing for the quizzes and preparing for your identifications, by doing exactly what I just said with the index cards, by the time you sit down and you're ready to write your essay, you have done all of the research. And the medium of these index cards is very handy, because what you're able to do is you lay these index cards out on your desk or a table, and you look at them and you see if there's any kind of logical sequence you can begin to put these things in, right? So you might you might say, okay, I'm going to, most students do this, they organize their essay by they organize their essay chronologically by dates, right? So they'll just go, this happened in the early 1600s, this happened in the mid 1600s, this happened in the early 1700s, and they put it in some sort of order. But you can organize it thematically, conceptually, whatever you want to organize it. But this helps organize it, because you lay it out, you have some cards that seem to fit the introduction, you put that there. You have some cards that seem to fit the first or first couple of paragraphs, right? And you just organize it out, and then you get your laptop or your desk computer and you have your note cards all laid out, and you type your narrative around the notes that you have laid out there in front of you. And you will find, if you work as you go and you do this diligently with discipline, that the essays seem to write themselves. You're not really stressed out when it comes time to actually sitting down to write them, because you did the work as you went. So a lot of students ignore that advice and they freak out the night before, and you want to avoid that as much as possible, all that freaking out and stress, because it does a couple of things. One, it compromises your health. This is why students start to get sick in the middle of the semester. Stress leads to depression, right? And when you're depressed, you get very discouraged, and you just start saying, well, screw it, I'm not going to do anything. And this is why parking becomes a lot more accessible here come late October, early November. Students get really stressed out and they just say, well, I'll just do it next semester. You want to avoid doing that, right? You're here, so get it done. So do take my advice. It's not something I created. It was something I learned from other students when I was an undergraduate. I was freaking out about having to write essays. It was very difficult, and then somebody taught me that method, and I've employed that method ever since, and it's been very helpful. And I've come to find out that's what most people who are kind of relaxed about school, they employ that method as well. Any questions about that method?
I noticed on one of your grading rubrics, you have note cards listed. Is that an old requirement or a face-to-face only requirement? Or
Yes, that would be a face-to-face requirement. So since you guys are online students, I'm just going to say I highly encourage you to do it.
okay.
Melinda asks, can you please elaborate how we need to use Chicago Tribune or what it is? I'm confused. The first thing I'll say, Melinda, is, and to anyone listening, don't overthink it. Right? A lot of students get really freaked out about citation. Don't overthink it. I've given you plenty of links. If those links don't work as far as examples are concerned, Google Chicago Tribune. So you want to footnote any information that you are citing and have a works cited page. There are lots of engines that will do it for you. So if you just type in the information, you will it will create the footnote information for you. Word documents, if you go to referencing, it will also create kind of an engine for you. So you can use that as well. Everything you're citing is from a website. So if you simply Google Chicago Tribune footnote website, it'll take you to it and it will show you the format of how to do it, which is basically the name of the website, which is, for our purposes, Robert Kennedy's United States History class. It will tell you to put in the website. It might ask you to cite when the website was first published. You don't know when that was because there is no information for that here. So you just write down when you last asked the website. So that could be, September 1st, 2016. But yeah, don't overthink it. A lot of it's all there for you. So just follow the format. You're footnoting and you have a works cited page. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Adam. Here's an engine you can use. Yeah, a lot of students, it's a good question. And I think it derives from, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. It must be really mysterious, and you must probably have to know some sort of formula, like a math equation. No, you just look at the information I've provided. If that's not helpful, Google Chicago Turabian, how to footnote a website, and Google Turabian, how to bibliography information for websites, because that's basically all you're citing is websites, the websites that are associated for this course. Any other questions?
So wait, now that we have these quizzes that are going to have the learning objectives, the essay exam, those aren't papers? Those are something that are similar to the quizzes?
No, they're papers. Yeah.
Okay, and those are what we use the Turabian on, not the potential learning objectives that will come up in our tests.
Yeah, so keep those two terms distinct, quizzes and exams. The quizzes are timed quizzes that will ask you to respond to randomly selected learning objectives and occasionally identifications as it's listed in the course schedule. And then exams are essays that you are preparing based on the prompts that are provided for Unit 1, 2, and 3. So the essays aren't timed, you work as you go. That's what I was referring to when it comes to preparing with note cards.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
Sir, you said
Yeah.
the essays are not timed, but is it something that we can start and then come back to, or once we start, we have to finish it?
It is a paper you're submitting to Blackboard, so you should be starting it now as far as even research is concerned. So you're preparing a paper. Once your paper is done, you will submit it to Blackboard on or before the due date.
Right, but if I have all my note cards and I have all my information ready, so I have to sit down and type it out on the spot under the lowdown.
No. You're not using a lockdown browser for the exams. You're putting it in a Word document. You're writing a paper. The quiz that only applies to the quizzes. The quizzes, yes. Quizzes, you go into the assessment link. It opens up a window and it will select a learning objective for you to respond to, and you have to do it all at once. But for the exams, you're writing it out in a Word document.
Okay.
So yeah, Nancy, keep in mind that the state, I'm just trying to give you basically a point of reference of where Native Americans lived in the map before European contact. So yes, Nez Perce, they existed in parts of Oregon, they existed in parts of Washington, they existed in parts of Idaho. They existed in parts of regions that were before there were states. So yes, they kind of existed in areas based on the geology and the geography of the area rather than imaginary state lines. So yes, there will be, for some of them, lots of different states in which they live in. Any other questions? Let me know. Otherwise, we can conclude the session. I just wanted to come on and and make sure everybody was up to speed as far as the expectations are concerned. We've had some great questions so far.
Are you ever going to host one of these chat sessions later in the evening?
Yeah, I usually do them on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, but I had some time today, so.
Ah, okay. Was that listed in the syllabus?
No, it wasn't listed in the syllabus.
I just asked because if you do host them later in the evening, I live in Germany, so the time difference, it would end up being like, I don't know, 3 in the morning or something like that for me.
Okay. Yeah, they're never required. It would be impossible to have a required session just because, yeah, there's people that live in Germany or in California or wherever. So they will always be recorded, and as soon as they fix whatever has been kind of broken with these, they will be downloaded and shared. So in case there's some good information there, students,
Okay.
every student can benefit from it.
Okay. I mean, it's not a problem whenever you decide to hold it, but just notification beforehand so that I can plan my sleep schedule.
Yeah, certainly. If you're able to, if you're up or happen to be up, that would be great if you joined us. But definitely don't go too out of your way to join us if you're needing the sleep. I don't want to sleep deprive you. I'd rather you visit the content and prepare than hang out with us. But if you're able to hang with us, definitely do, because I like how you're contributing here. So it's good to have contribute to the discussion.
Thank you. I thought sleep deprivation was part of being a student.
It can be, but a lot of that does come from figuring out how to prepare. It is kind of a catch-22, sleep deprivation, when it comes to being a student, because sleep is actually essential to learning. It really is, because I mean that's what we're doing when we dream. When we dream, it's not just to have some weird stories that happen in our head in the middle of the night. It's basically your brain defragging. It's organizing all of the memories and events of the day in the appropriate network of your brain that's being built on a consistent basis. And so if you're sleep deprived and you're not able to dream and go through that REM, it becomes difficult to learn and become familiar with new information.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions at all? Can you explain one more time on the ID? Can you give me a specific question, Nancy? Is there something specific about the IDs that you need to know? Do we choose a random one from the list you provided with us? Yes, but do make sure the one you're choosing hasn't been chosen yet. So you might want to identify about 3 or 4 to prepare for. So when it comes time for you to post it, if somebody has taken it, you have another one you can quickly post. And do keep in mind that it wouldn't be a waste of time if you're preparing for a few of them there, because you will be asked to respond to those in quiz 2, 4, and 5, as it indicates in the syllabus. So where do you post it? You go to, let me bring up Blackboard here. Let me see if I'm able to share the application, the screen here. Share application. Application screen. Are you screen 3? Yeah, you're screen 3. Uh-oh. That's not what I want to happen. That's pretty cool looking, though. But probably doesn't help anybody here. Let's see. Why is it doing that? Screen. Let's put it somewhere else. Let's put this here and this here and see what happens. Hey, there we go. Okay, cool. So you're gonna go to. I'm in the I'm in the mini-mesters link. It applies to both mini-mester and full semester. So you go here, Unit 1. Oh, let me actually. Sorry. Let me open it up as it would be for a student. I'm in editing mode. Entering student mode. Okay. There we go. Okay, so you're going to go to Unit 1. Click. And the menu is on the side right here. So if you don't see it, scroll down. Identification discussions posts right here. So you click right here. Underneath ID Unit 1. I'll change that though. I should make that post ID Unit 1. Click to launch. And then click right here, reply to this thread as indicated, which means just apply as it's indicated in the instructions. And then just click right here, reply, and a HTML window should show up. And go ahead and type away, and then click submit. If you see anything, a little red squiggly lines on there, check for spelling. So all that kind of stuff. If you want to open up the window too, see this little icon right here with all the arrows? You click that, it'll open up the window. So that's kind of good to know since that window is a little small. All right.
Are we allowed to call dibs like the person did?
No.
Okay.
No, that was illegal. Sorry, just kidding. But yeah, will there be extra credit aside from the ID? ID posts are not extra credit. That's required, and it's only 3 IDs, correct? No, you're just choosing one. Then you respond to 2 students who have posted their IDs. There will be occasionally extra credit though. All right. Any other questions? Good questions. Glad we're having this session. Not for now. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
the other day, on the other Q&A, you were talking about the overview of the whole course, but can you kind of let me know where just Unit 1 is going? Like up to what are we looking at? Because I'm still on Chapter 1. So what is Chapter 2 going to bring in?
Well, the overview of Unit 1 is the colonization of the Americas and how, and specifically, and most focused, I should say, on how the English colonized the Americas and the formation and the beginning of this new culture that's developing in British America that will ultimately make sense of the revolution, right? So when the revolution happens, it's not a surprise. The American Revolution, the War for Independence happens. It's not a surprise at all to anybody who was paying attention at that time. You're basically having people coming from England for various reasons, for wealth, for escaping religious persecution when it comes to the so-called Puritans, for people that are looking for economic opportunities or getting out of debtors' prisons, whatever the case is. But they're over here and they're developing in a very independent manner because of the distance from which they are from England. It's 3,000 miles away, and this is before modern communication, all of that, quite obviously. And England really isn't in a position to control its colonies. So this is you'll learn more about this in chapter 3, but the term is called salutary neglect, where the colonies were able to develop independent from England and independently from each other. So there isn't like this cohesive network that really controls all of the colonies. So when it comes to 1763, this is towards the end of the unit, after the French Indian War, the English, one, now are in a position to control their colonies, and two, have a need to control their colonies because that war costs so much money. So they're going to attempt to begin taxing these colonies. The taxing wasn't too much of a big deal. The colonists understood the need for taxes. They taxed each other after all, but they were concerned that they had no say in the process of how things were taxed and to what extent. So this is basically the overview of you're seeing how these colonies develop independent from each other and from England. You're also seeing how the two regions of the colonies, the North versus the South. You also have the middle colonies which kind of share both features of the North and the South, but the two distinctions are the North and the South. The North is more focused on industry and commercial interests, financial interests. They have a diverse economy. The South is focused mostly on agriculture, and as a result of that, their economy isn't diversified. So they develop in very distinct ways from each other, sorry. And in doing so, they are going to, from the get-go, have a very contentious relationship with each other. So in a lot of ways, you can argue that the seeds for the American Civil War, which occurs in 1860, which is what we'll cover in Unit 3, can be seen in the beginning of Unit 1, in the time period we're studying now. The other thing the overview you want to keep in mind too is the development of race-based slavery. It happens in British America. Now, slavery is part and parcel of civilization. It has always been with civilization, but what becomes distinct in British America and the Americas in general is race-based slavery. That is, as economic forces begin to develop in British America, and you'll get the details for this in Chapter 2, but it is going to be increasingly clear that to be a slave meant to be African, to be black, and to be black meant to be a slave, right? And that is going to create this phenomena of white supremacy and contentious relationships that are definitely still definitely issues that we're still contending with to this very moment. Any specifics of Unit 1 that you would like me to go over?
Are we going to touch on like the origins of slavery, like why why it was black people and not some other underclass from Europe?
Yeah, that's the thesis of Chapter 2, basically. And so to give you a general overview of why Africans became slaves and no other underclass of Europeans did. At first they did. It was basically let me just throw this out there. England is Johnny-come-lately to the game of European empires. They're the last to get into it. And what they saw the Spanish do and the Portuguese do, from their perspective, was they made a terrible mistake of what, from their perspective, of this is how they would put it. It's not actual, but how they saw it is they polluted their blood, right? They mixed with the indigenous people there, and they mixed with the Africans that they brought over. And the English, as they're coming in, say, no, we're going to make colonies strictly for English people, and we're not going to mix our blood with other people. And so they made a concerted effort for the first few generations to avoid bringing in African slaves. They had plenty of poor English people that were filling up the debtors' prisons, so they didn't have a real need to import slaves, but that is obviously going to change. So do keep in mind about the dates. Dates are important because they bring in perspective. It's kind of easy to lump in all of the 1600s into a kind of a single concept, but a lot happens between 1607 and the 1650s. We're talking about 2 generations, basically, during that time period. And so from 16, well, I should probably push it up to about 1615. This is when you begin to see indentured servants coming to Jamestown and other parts of Virginia. It is indentured servants that are coming, white, poor English people. And that was all well and good. For the English, it served their purposes as far as exploiting the land and satisfying the tremendous labor demands for tobacco. A couple of things begin to change, though. At first, the people who first got into the tobacco agricultural business made a killing, right? And so whenever that happens, other people see that and go, wow, I want to make a lot of money too, so I'm going to get into that. And so by the time we get into the 1630s, you have a glut as far as the supply is concerned. So the price begins to diminish. Anybody in business, the first thing they look at when their profits begin to dip, and the profits are beginning to dip for a lot of the people who own plantations, they're going to try to figure out how to cut costs, right? The other thing to keep in mind too about labor costs is that by the time we get to the late 1630s, 1640s, indentured servants are starting to, or let me say, poor English people in England are hearing about the conditions indentured servants are going through, and so fewer people are coming over. At first, like in the 1620s, early 1630s, poor English people are more than happy to come over because they can't believe what they're hearing, that all I have to work is 5 to 7 years, and after that I get a bunch of land. That sounds great, right? This is a dream come, not even a dream come true. It's an unexpected dream that no one even would have considered a possibility in England or anywhere in Europe, right? These are the seeds of the American dream, right? You work hard, and you can become your own person. People in England are beginning to find out, though, that the promises of being indentured servants don't match the reality, right? A lot of these indentured servants die, or if they do get the land is actually unusable, and so less indentured servants are coming over. So the price, the ability for indentured servants to negotiate with their masters is now becoming a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more in favor for indentured servants. So coupled with the fact that indentured servants can negotiate a little bit more on their end, and the price of tobacco is going down, begins slowly, let me emphasize slowly, by the 1640s for plantation owners in Jamestown and other now emerging colonies in the South to contract out for African slaves, right? So between the 1640s and the 1670s, plantations, if you looked out in a plantation, it would have been a mix of white and black bodies doing the labor, to make sure that these plantation owners were fabulously wealthy. What begins to happen by the 1670s is that you're having more and more people come over as indentured servants or slaves. The terms are kind of intermixed at this point, and tensions are growing and growing. One of the reasons why the tensions are growing is that since a lot of the indentured servants, and even Africans included, when they are freed and they're given their land, the land is unusable. And so since the land is unusable because it's filled with rocks or it doesn't have access to water, whatever the case is, they go west, right? They go west where Powhatan and Doig Indians live, and those people don't want English settlers to come over to their land. And so there is violence, there's skirmishes on the border, right? And that's not good for business either, right? So for anyone who lives in the valley here, think about the perceptions of this valley. I come from Northern California, so whenever I talk to like my family, they always ask me about the violence on the border. Right? There's a perception here that we go out and there's like drug cartels shooting over our heads as we go over to, you know, HEB or something like that, right? It's not the reality of the situation, but it's the perception, right? So that mere perception that there might be violence on the border, that's happening in Virginia, right? This is still a developing colony. The people there who have money want more people with money to come over. They don't want these indentured servants or these freed indentured servants, freed former slaves, to go mixing with native populations to antagonize them. And so they are beginning to say to them, if you go over into Powhatan or Dogue Indian land, we will come and arrest you. To make a long story short, and you guys will learn more about this in chapter 2, a gentleman who was a member of the aristocracy, his name is Nathaniel Bacon, comes over to Virginia in 1676. Keep that date in mind. It's a very important date. It's 100 years before the Declaration of Independence. Comes over and notices this tension that is developing between the two classes of rich and poor. And the tension is very acute. And so he sees an opportunity of himself to aggrandize himself, to exploit this. And he basically says that we need to push back against the native population here and organize a militia to go after these people, to open up lands for people who have finished out their indentured contracts. He's told by Governor Berkeley, no, we're not in a position to do that. There's a lot of indigenous people that live here, and if we don't play our cards right, what happened in 1622, and what happened in 1622 was a massive massacre of the Powhatan Indians. They came in to the English colony and wiped out 25% of the colonists. That's in living memory of a lot of people, or distant living memory of a lot of people, and they don't want that to happen again. So they say, you know, we can't really push them too far. Maybe in the future we can, but not now is not the time. Nathaniel Bacon doesn't want to hear anything like that, so he organizes the militia on his own of basically poor white and black folks, and he goes after Native Americans in warfare. This descends quickly out of control for all parties. The Governor Berkeley at the time, goes after Nathaniel Bacon's militia. This is referred to as Bacon's Rebellion. At first, Bacon and his militia are quite successful, but things go from that to worse for this rebellion. Nathaniel Bacon contracts dysentery and he dies, and a lot of the leadership descends there, and the British Navy comes over and they're able to squash the rebellion. But what comes out of that situation, basically, of Jamestown burning to the ground, it was pretty devastating for Jamestown as a whole, is that they had created a situation, a powder keg situation, where people were identifying not as race, but as class. So poor people in Virginia were white and black, and they were looking at each other as a community, because they were, and realizing that they had something in common, a common enemy, which was the rich landed elite of Virginia. And so post Bacon's Rebellion, what you begin to see happen is a lot of laws that had been passed about anti-miscegenation, which is race mixing. Those are going to be enforced. Landowners are going to be encouraged through tax policy to contract out for African slaves rather than indentured servants. And so by the time, this is 1676, so you have the rest of the 1670s, 1680s, 1690s. In that time period, more and more of people working out in the tobacco fields, the cotton fields, indigo, hemp, rice, are more and more Africans, right? And so by the time you get to the 1700s, it's definitely institutionalized, and there is this mindset, no matter what your position in his life as an English person, as a white person, no matter where you are, you can realize that, well, at least I'm not a slave. At least I'm not black. I have an opportunity here that distinguishes myself from the other. And so by the time we get to the early 1700s, late 1690s, you have this culture of white supremacy developing, which has lasted through the colonial era and obviously through much of U.S. history. So you will get more details in chapter 2 that will put more of that picture that I just laid out for you, Adam. Does that make sense in any way to you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? And information obtained can be found. No, Nancy, no Google in this class. As posted in various places in the syllabus and in the orientation, for any work in this class, you are not to use outside sources. Only use sources from this course, right? And that's what I'm looking for. Are you using information that specifically comes from this course? I've had too many students use Google and they're giving me nonsense. So it's just information overload out in Google land. And so the course is contained. It gives you all the information. When you're preparing for the IDs, avoid fishing. You're not fishing for information. Just as you come across information that helps you identify, respond to the ID, write it down. So let's say you pick Jamestown and you see, oh, Jamestown was founded in 1607. Excellent. And then you're reading some more, and then you go, oh, there was this place called the House of Burgesses founded in 1619, which was the first democratic assembly in the Americas, and was also an example of salutary neglect. I will write that down, right? That's the way you want to go about it, so your information is thorough. But yeah, please do not use Google. It will do nothing but hurt you. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, that was I think a very productive session. I'll stay if anyone has any questions, but if not, then we could conclude this session. Just keep doing what you're doing. Know that most students that go through my course pass, and a lot of them do very well and earn B's and A's. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's kind of typical. That's typical for most college courses. Just take one day at a time and try to set yourself a goal of, okay, I'm going to get through a chapter and a half a day or something to that extent, or whatever you're able to do within the parameters. Do understand there's always opportunity to improve your scores. So again, I explained this in the orientation and earlier, but let's say in quiz 1 you earned a 60%, but you were able to further develop your notes. You get to quiz 2, which quiz 2 will ask you material that was covered in quiz 1 as well as for information that's going to be covered in quiz 2. You went back, further developed your notes. You have a good sense of what's expected. So for the information for quiz 2 during that week, you were able to further develop it there as well. You ended up earning a 95%. That 95% will be applied to quiz 1 minus 10%, which would make your quiz 1 from a 60 to an 85%, right? So do the best you can and know that you can always go back and further improve your overall grade as you go through this course.
Can we do worse, or like if we get a 60% on the first test and then we get a 50%?
Yeah. No, it only works in your favor. So
Okay.
yeah, if you do the opposite, you maintain how the better score from the previous quizzes. All right. So I'll conclude the session unless somebody has another question real quick. I think we got some good information. I probably will. I'm going to see, trying to finalize some things in my schedule. I might be able to have like a weekly session in the afternoons and then a couple of sessions in the evening on Tuesdays, Thursdays. I'm trying to work it out. I will post on Selly a very specific schedule within the next week. I think this is working out very good for those that are able to join, and then it could work out good if I'm able to download these recordings for students that aren't able to join, because I can start getting specific content too, giving you guys little mini lectures on the content as well later on. So Not seeing any more questions, so I will conclude the session. It's been a solid hour, so that's probably enough for everybody. You probably got bigger and better things to do than listen to me. So unless you do have a question, other than that, we'll call it a day. So, but get a hold of me on Selly if questions do come up, or email. If you get a hold of me on Selly, make sure you're private messaging me rather than putting your question to the entire class, unless you want other students to help you out, which is great. Other students can help you out. But if it's like a question pertaining to your specific grade, you might want to private message me on that, so it's not going out to everybody. But do rely on your fellow students for general information. They are very helpful. You can help each other. That works too. Adios, guys. I'll talk with you later.
Ciao.
Bye, Dad.